40 million people in the United States suffer from some kind of anxiety or depression. We spend $42 billion a year medicating ourselves against anxiety and depression. We've become like a nation of worriers. We worry about everything. We worry about debt and finances and our jobs, our careers, our marriages, relationships, our kids. We worry about everything. Charles Spurgeon even said, "Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows. It only empties today of its strength." We know we're supposed to trust in God. We know that we're supposed to put our trust in our confidence in Him, but worry is like this poison that's infecting us. And the worst thing about it is that we know that nothing that we worry about really in the end even matters. Greek philosopher Plato said, "Nothing in the affairs of men is worthy of any great anxiety." It's not worth it. It's not worth destroying our health over. It's not worth destroying our marriages over. It's not worth destroying our sanity over. It's just not worth it. But as Norman Mailer said, the natural role of modern man is anxiety. We can't stop worrying. King David knew what worry and anxiety looked like. We may manage the affairs of a household, or maybe some of us a farm or a ranch, but David managed the affairs of a huge and powerful kingdom. Worry ate away at his spirit. Power struggles, relationship problems, family issues, difficulties with people, wars with his enemies, all these things contributed toward his worry. And then toward the end of his life, his family began to unravel. His son Amnon raped his daughter Tamar, and all of a sudden the family was divided about over the issue and how to handle it. And his son Absalom was so angry at his father for allowing this to happen that he sent some of his men to go and murder his half-brother Amnon. And King David was just torn in two. 2 Samuel 13:37 says that David mourned and wept over his son that had died. But then 2 verses later, in verse 39, it says that he longed to go see his son Absalom. He was a father that was torn in two over the problems that he was experiencing. And then to make matters worse, Absalom comes back into the picture and he pretends to be sorrowful and repentant, and he pretends to be the good son, but all the while he goes and he influences the people of Israel away from his father David. He goes on to lead a revolution against his father David, and the whole kingdom of Israel is cast into turmoil. So this is the background of the psalm that we're going to be studying today. David looks out from his palace and he sees turmoil and war and civil war spreading all around him. There's violence in the city streets, and he's trying to figure out what to do. His heart is filled with worry and anxiety, and he pours out his soul to the Lord. Psalm 55 verse 1 says, "God, listen to my prayer and do not hide from my plea for help. Pay attention to me and answer me. I am restless and in turmoil with my complaint because of the enemy's words, because of the pressure of the wicked. For they bring down disaster on me, and they harass me in anger. My heart shudders within me. Terrors of death sweep over me. Fear and trembling grip me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, if only I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and find rest. How far away I would flee. I would stay in the wilderness. I would hurry to my shelter from the raging wind and the storm." So these are the words of a worried man, a broken man, a man with no answers. David has always been the strong leader and the powerful king and the man after God's own heart, but now he's struggling and he's suffering and he's worried. He has never faced a problem like this before. When he went and he stood before Goliath the giant, he didn't even hesitate. He went and he picked up that stone and he swung his sling and he knocked down the giant. But now as he sits and he surveys his situation, he can't see a stone big enough to knock down the giants looming over him. Listen to some of the words that he uses to describe himself in these verses. Restless and in turmoil in verse 2. Pressured and harassed in verse 3. Shuddering and terrified in verse 4. And fearful, trembling, horrified, and overwhelmed in verse 5. Worry and anxiety are tearing him apart. British writer John Lubbock said, "A day of worry is more exhausting than a week of work." And this is where David finds himself, exhausted, overwhelmed, unable to cope. And this is where we find ourselves sometimes. We worry and we fret and we think through all the worst case scenarios and we suffer in silence, and the cycle continues because nothing ever gets fixed by worrying about it. Look at David's response and his desire in verses 6 through 8. He said, "If only I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and find rest. How far away I would flee. I would stay in the wilderness. I would hurry to my shelter from the raging wind and the storm." David understands that the answer to his problems is not found in himself, that he's got to get away from this situation. He's got to remove himself from what's going on here. He can't stay in the center of his problem doing the same things and hope for different results. That's the definition of insanity, right? He's got to fly away. He's got to get out of this situation. Unfortunately, though, his troubles really are just beginning. We saw here in the first 8 verses that our circumstances can cause worry and anxiety, but now we're going to see in verses 9 through 11 that people can cause worry and anxiety in our lives. Let's read this. 55 verse 9 says, "Lord, confuse and confound their speech, for I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they make the rounds on its walls. Crime and trouble are within it. Destruction is inside it. Oppression and deceit never leave its marketplace." David is literally looking outside the windows of his fortress and he's seeing war being waged against him in his own city. Absalom's forces are significant, and David sees them destroying his capital. 2 Samuel 15:12 says, "The conspiracy grew stronger, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number." And as the people increased in number, David's worry and anxiety increased with them. And then a messenger comes and tells David something that absolutely breaks his heart and changes his perspective for the rest of the psalm. In 2 Samuel 17:21, David is told that his friend and advisor, a man named Ahithophel, has betrayed him and has joined Absalom and has sent 12,000 men to pursue David and kill him. So let's read how David responds to this news. Psalm 55 verse 12. "Now it is not an enemy who insults me. Otherwise I could bear it. It is not a foe who rises up against me. Otherwise I could hide from him. But it is you, a man who is my peer, my companion, and my good friend. We used to have close fellowship. We walked with the crowd into the house of God. Let death take them by surprise. Let them go down to Sheol alive, because evil is in their homes and within them." And then verse 20 says, "My friend acts violently against those at peace with him. He violates his covenant. His buttery words are smooth, but war is in his heart. His words are softer than oil, but they are drawn swords." David is angry, and he's broken, and he's fearful, and he's anxious. In our lives, between the circumstances and the people in our lives, worry and anxiety will tear us apart if we let them. But the Lord will always be there to pick up the pieces and put them back together. So circumstances can cause worry and anxiety. People can cause worry and anxiety. But number 3, trust and praise are the answers to worry and anxiety. Let's look at Psalm chapter 55, and we're going to skip around a little bit and fill in some of the gaps. And so we're going to start in verse 16. It says, "But I call to God, and the Lord will save me. I complain and groan morning, noon, and night, and he hears my voice. Though many are against me, he will redeem me from my battle unharmed. God, the one enthroned from long ago, will hear and will humiliate them, because they do not change and they do not fear God." Look at verse 22. "Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never allow the righteous to be shaken. God will bring them down to the pit of destruction. Men of bloodshed and treachery will not live out half their days, but I will trust in you." Now move to chapter 56, and let's read verses 3 and 4. It says, "When I am afraid, I will trust in you. In God whose word I praise, in God I trust. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? Now look at verse 8. You yourself have recorded my wanderings. You've put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Then my enemies will retreat on the day when I call. And this I know, God is for me. In God whose word I praise, in the Lord whose word I praise, in God I trust, I will not be afraid. What can mere humans do to me? Do we want to stop worrying about our circumstances and the people in our lives? Then we've got to start lifting our eyes up to heaven and start praising His name. Start trusting that God is for us. He marches for us. All of heaven rushes in response to the prayers of one of God's children. Angels uphold us. The Spirit indwells us. The Son pleads our case. The Father blesses and He heals. God is for us. The right response to worry and anxiety is absolute trust in the God who is enthroned above everything. He's enthroned above the doctor's diagnosis. He's enthroned above the divorce. He's enthroned above the problems with kids. He's enthroned above the marriage difficulties. He's enthroned above the financial problems. He's enthroned above every one of our problems and our pains and our sufferings and the trials that we face. He's enthroned above them all. He is in complete control. Nothing happens on this earth that doesn't first pass through His hands. He moves the currents of history. He sends lightning and thunder and rain from heaven. He restrains the devil. He's in control. We've got to start trusting Him. David had everything that he would ever need. He had fame, he had success, he had influence, he had power, he had wealth, but his life was also filled with worry and anxiety. And we do the same thing. We think, if only I had more money, then my worry and anxiety would go away. Wrong. Well, we think, if only I had a better job, my worry and anxiety would go away. Wrong. We think, if only my kids would straighten up, I wouldn't have so much worry and anxiety. Wrong. We think, if I had a different spouse or a different career or a different house or something different, my life wouldn't be filled with so much worry and anxiety. But we're going about it the wrong way. When you add worldly answers to worldly problems, you're never going to get a heavenly solution. So when this world bears down on you and the stresses and trials of this life eat away at your hope and confidence, we've got to turn to the only one who can make a difference in our life. Turn to the Lord. He says in chapter 55, verse 22, cast your burden on Him and He will sustain you.